Good Sunday morning.
Yeah. Morning.
It's good to see you all. We appreciate you being here. Welcome to Presbyterian Church of the Covenant in Greensboro, North Carolina. Welcome to all who are here in person. Welcome to our members who are watching online. And from our new kind of internet members who are online, we appreciate your presence here. If you are watching online, please leave any thoughts or comments you have, as well as where you're from. Just let us all know who all's joining with us. It's kind of fun to see where this small community is reaching and who out there is joining in with us. We've had some broadcast problems over the last few Sundays, so we'll remind folks we're trying to upgrade that. If you would like to contribute to that cause, particularly those who are watching weekly online, you can go to athinkingchurch.org, and there's a donate button in the top right-hand corner. For those that are here, as you know, we don't pass the basket, the offering plate during the service, just to lower the amount of contact we have with each other. But you can find those at the entrances sitting on a table. I hope that you will take a moment to take advantage of that. Are there any other immediate announcements? We will, at the end of the service, pause after the broadcast and have some local announcements. Are there any announcements that you feel we need to make in the moment? If not, then let's begin with our scripture reading for today. I'm going to be reading from Psalms, chapter 139, verses 1 through 6, and then 13. And I'm reading from the New American Standard Bible. Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I get up. You understand my thought from far away. You scrutinize my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all of my ways. Even before there was word on my tongue, behold, Lord, you knew it all. You've encircled me behind and in front and placed your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is too high. I cannot comprehend it. For you created my innermost parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you because I am awesomely and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. May we add blessing and understanding to the reading of these words. Christy, can we get you to play some music for us?
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As I told Mark, I'm a nervous wreck. It's been a year and a half since I was played out, and I'm nervous. It's like, oh my gosh, I need the lyric sheet. So y'all bear with me, and we've had quite a year together in part, haven't we? It's been a real learning experience. Anyway, so even though these are songs I wrote, I still need to read the lyric sheet. And like every other songwriter, that's what I did this year, or the last couple of years, was just write. And I have found I have a lot more to say than I thought I did. I've learned how to be grateful for the little things in life, 'cause little things make me so much. And I'm thankful for so much now that I didn't see before. Now that I have, I'll try hard to see others. Yeah, I lost some things, no doubt, but my blessings I've got plenty. That's what I learned in 2020. I found I had some bias that was very deep inside. I didn't even know that it existed, but I promise to do better, 'cause now that I'm aware how innocently things can sound so twisted, I I will listen, I will learn. I'll speak up for one or many. What I learned in 2020. Going forward, I'll look back, and I'll know not what to do. 'Cause what they say of hindsight has never been more true. I've learned that in a crisis, I'll do what I am asked, especially if I think it helps another. And the faith I haven't lost it all. All we're asked to do is love each other. And I'm lucky to have friends. I never knew how many. That's what I learned in 2020.
Thank you for that, Christy, so much. As you can tell from that song, we certainly are fortunate to have Christy with us from time to time. We really appreciate you. If you want to hear more from Christy, go to ChristyJackson.com. Those online, you saw that printed across when she was playing, and don't worry, it'll be there again. We will hear another song from her. But thank you again. We appreciate that. Today's the final part 3 of my series entitled Boundless Faith. Today is entitled Queer Lives. Now, I'd like to start this final part of our introduction to queer theology, much like I started my first part, by acknowledging right up front that I do not look like the person who should be giving a talk, more or less 3 talks. Theology. I'm a white, heterosexual, cisgendered male Gen Xer from the South. And as I said, I'm sure there are probably even more reasons why I do not seem like the person who should be giving this talk, but I'm trying really hard not to think about it too much because I'll give this talk. So, just to be clear, I make no claims of being an expert in queer theology. I'm just a very enthusiastic student. I can honestly tell you, as I said before, there's no type of theology that has ever resonated with me more spiritually or intellectually than queer theology. And as we are all beginning to see, at least I hope that we all are beginning to see, queer theology itself suggests that the barriers that some folks will point to as the reasons why I shouldn't be giving this talk might be the very reasons why I should be giving the talk, or at least it's good that someone like me is able to begin to explore this theology with you. Now that's the perspective that I opened our series with, but I also like to remind you of how I concluded each of those talks. Each week, I've wrapped up the talk with a quote from the Reverend Dr. Patrick Chang from his book, A Perfect Love and Queer Theology. And in it he says, God is the very manifestation of a love that is so extreme that it dissolves existing boundaries. So I've said, it seems to me, living a life that dismantles existing boundaries is the very definition of being in relationship with God. A radical love that is so extreme that it dissolves boundaries is the concept that is at the center, the core of queer theology. And as we were reminded last week, it's also a concept that's also at the core of the life and teachings of Jesus. I gave the example of Jesus in the temple grounds. I said, when Jesus was confronted with injustice in the temple grounds in Jerusalem, he was filled with righteous anger. He got to work literally dismantling the tools that they were using to take advantage of others. He started flipping tables. And when we're confronted with injustice, we should too. We should too. There are so many areas in each of our lives where we have bought hook, line, and sinker into the normalized binary narratives of the dominant culture. They are the existing boundaries that radical love is meant to dissolve. So let's take a look at our lives and consider how we, out of an abundance of radical love, might begin to dissolve these false binary divisions and move our lives towards a more boundless faith. Now, clearly, there are lots of areas in our lives where binaries tend to rule most people's perspectives. Man, woman, us against them, civilized, uncivilized, black, white, Christian, non-Christian, able-bodied, handicapped. The list could go on and on. And for that reason, in the time that we have here today, I'm just going to look at one specific imposed binary and ways we might live into radical love by dissolving them in our lives. And from that one area, I am confident that we can all extrapolate ways to dissolve other false binaries in our lives. Now, the area that I would like for us to consider today is the very foundation of queer theology. It is the normalizing of sex and sexuality to male, female, heterosexual, homosexual. In progressive gatherings like ours, most of us intellectually recognize that those binaries do not match reality. As a matter, and as a result of that, we tend to be welcoming and safe places for those whose lives stand over and against those false norms from the dominant culture, which is a wonderful thing, but I have to say, while being a welcoming congregation when it comes to the LGBTQIA plus community, while that is a celebrated in spiritually progressive communities, it does very little to dissolve the existing structures of marginalization that those very people face when they leave our buildings. What we need are new norms, new normalizing. The dominant culture has set the table with their rules and expectations and normalizations long before most of us were ever invited to the meal. And rather than accept what we are served, we need to start turning the tables. We need to start setting new norms that don't live into false binaries. Because those false binaries try to claim that some people aren't as wonderfully made as others, that way of seeing things flies in the face of today's scripture reading that tells us, "For you created my innermost parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you because I am awesomely and wonderfully made." So I say, let's be more active in normalizing things like pronoun sharing. Now, frankly, it couldn't be easier to do, and it is an active way to affirm that not all people's gender identification match the labels that society might put on them based on their outward appearance. Much like using someone's name can show a sign of respect, using the correct personal pronoun carries the very similar, same weight. Laverne Cox, a trans actress on Orange is the New Black, says that misgendering a trans person is, and I quote, an act of violence. I mean, how would you feel if someone continually and intentionally misgendered you? Using correct pronouns is validating and it's loving. If you take your spirituality seriously, you should take using correct pronouns seriously. So you might ask, how do we go about normalizing this? Well, I'll suggest just two simple things. One, just try adding your pronouns to your signatures and correspondence. I just use my name, and then in little parentheses, I put he, him, his. And then two, just like you give your name when introducing yourself, also give your pronouns. After all, they're both very important ways for people to refer to you. Now, I'll have to admit, I've got more work to do on that one, but just say something like, hey, I'm Mark, I pronounce it he, him, his. It's really a pleasure to meet you. It might feel the tiniest bit off at first, but honestly, it's just because you happen to do it. I promise it will feel more normal very quickly. More importantly, it will help normalize the behavior, which in turn will help dissolve the existing false binary by affirming that not all people's gender identification match the label that society might put on them based on their outward appearance. And I mean, honestly, it just seems like a loving thing to do. Now, we also need to be working towards a system for documenting birth. We currently use visual sexual characteristics to assign binary gender without regard to any internal realities. We need a better system, one that doesn't set up so many kids whose gender expression doesn't neatly match their physical sexual characteristics the way that dominant society tries to force on them, one that doesn't set them up for bullying and the internal struggles that our current system can lead to. And for that matter, gender reveal parties don't help either. They only serve to reinforce that false male-female narrative. For many of us, we also need to develop a new personal norm of using the word they as a singular pronoun. My first undergraduate degree was in English, and I have to admit that this one was a tough one for me at first. It just felt wrong, not in terms of acknowledging that the person I was referring to identified they as a pronoun. I was actually pretty good with that. My brain just couldn't quite adjust to it. It felt off, it felt forced. But you know, after just a little bit of thought, I realized we all have used they and them as singular pronouns before. You see, the English language just doesn't provide a gendered indefinite singular pronoun. So when it's needed, we already tend to use they or them to do the job, like in this. If Jack or Jill got a bike, if either Jack or Jill got a bike, I'd be glad to ride with them. That just seems normal, right? Once I realized that, it didn't take very long for my brain to sort of catch up. Well, mostly. Someone who I spend a few times with a week uses the pronouns they and them. And I cannot tell you the number of times that I use she, her in referring to them. Now, did you just hear that? I just used a gender indefinite singular pronoun, and most of you probably didn't even notice. Anyway, particularly at first, I used the wrong pronoun, but you know what? It was okay. It was okay. You know why? Because I also normalized apologizing. They were more than gracious and understanding. And it ultimately helped me normalize using they as a singular pronoun. Now, if this English major can do it, so can you. And the more of us who do it, the more we show radical love by dissolving yet another false binary boundary. Now, this is the big one. Let's also normalize not supporting corporations that support anti-LGBTQ agendas. For better or worse, we live in a world where money provides voice. We all vote with our wallets, whether we believe it or not. When you spend money with a corporation that is actively sending money to politicians and organizations that are actively trying to take away rights from queer folks like my son, you are providing them not only more money to do so, but also more reason to do so. Because if hurting the queer community with money they made from their business doesn't hurt their business, they have little incentive to stop doing it. I mean, I love a Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich. I haven't had one in years. Not because I don't want one, because I do want one. Because that momentary culinary pleasure is not worth being even the tiniest cog on the financial machine that supports the homophobic behavior of that misguided corporation. Admittedly, it's a small example of what radical love looks like in action. Love that is so extreme, it dissolves existing boundaries. Which brings me back to where I concluded the first two messages in the series, as well as where I started the second two, that quote from Dr. Chang's book, Radical Love. He says, God is the very manifestation of a love that is so extreme that it dissolves existing boundaries. As I continue to learn more about queer theology, I have to say I very much agree with him. So it does seem to me that living a life that dismantles existing boundaries is the very definition of being in a relationship with God. I encourage us all, as a community and as individuals, to do so. Amen. Christy, could we get another song from you, please?
Wow, I have to follow that.
I had to follow your song, so. Thank you.
Great message. This song came about. My friend Bruce and I played in a band together back when we were in our 20s, and after 40-some years, he calls up and his wife is coming to visit her mother at a nursing home for 2 hours, and he says, "You want to kick around in the TG for a couple hours?" And I was like, "That'd be great." But I was also aware, because Bruce and I are both very vocal on Facebook and very politically opposite. I mean, could not be more opposite. And I said, "I'll take 2 hours with Bruce." This is going to be really interesting. But so I was a little nervous. I was a little scared because I love this man. And I just thought, "Oh, please, Christy, don't say anything stupid or mean or make him feel." But anyway, but we just started talking. And the first thing I don't know why we thought of it, but we both decided that one of our concerns was debt. You know, the country's debt, and we agreed on that. It was like, wait a minute, there's a chance for us here. But it was really cool, so we did. So that's kind of where we started. And then we spent 2 hours together having just the most fabulous conversations and really in-depth discussions. And, I was really encouraged. I thought, well, okay, maybe there's hope for this divided world. It was cool. is the song that came from that. I know you have words, perhaps you can explain and help me see your point of view, and I'll try to do the same. Let's leave out all the clever names and just resort to facts. If we agree to disagree, we'll just leave it at that. Let's put our hearts together, not so much our heads, using words of kindness before we both forget. Let's take the things in common and talk about them first. Let's see if we can get this angry dialogue reversed. I hear what you're saying, but I'm not sure it's clear. Could you tell me why you feel this way? I'm missing something here. If we both read the good book, both believe in God, we're supposed to love each other and not be so at odds. Let's put our hearts together, not so much our heads, using words of kindness before we both forget. Let's take the things in common and talk about them first. Let's see if we can get this angry dialogue reversed. So this is what I'm thinking. Let's give this a try. I try to see it your way and you try to see it mine. And if we make some progress, let's shout it to the sky. And if we just keep talking, this whole world might just survive. Let's put our hearts together, so much our head, using words of kindness before we both forget. Let's take the things in common and talk about them first. Let's see if we can get this angry dialogue reversed. Let's put our hearts together. Let's put our hearts together. Let's put our hearts together.
Thank you again, Chris. That's the question. How am I supposed to follow that? I would say that's how you do it. So thank you for that very much. Let's take a moment and turn slightly more inward now for a time of prayer or meditation, or just take a moment of calmness and let these words wash over you. Let's bow our heads. May humanity be freed from its self-importance. May we be pulled from the depths of our short-sightedness and our short-sighted selfishness. Self-importance and selfishness that contribute to trying to normalize everyone else to us. May we be reminded of the interconnectedness of life. Let us live into the reality that a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Let us be inspired towards lives lived out for others, lives that persistently shout from the mountaintops, you will not harm him, you will not take advantage of her, you will not marginalize them. I demand justice. We demand justice. May we lead lives that learn from the queer experience, becoming more aware of societally imposed binaries that bury some folks on the margins underneath the unbearable knowledge that profit and power and prestige seem to be more important to the world than their own dignity, and that the unique reflection of the divine in them is somehow less valued than others. May we be the bringers of justice, voices for equality, radical love for a world in need. Amen. A reminder that we'll stay and have some local announcements after this lesson, but first do receive this blessing. May you walk in harmony with each other and creation, recognizing that we are one. And may you know love and happiness throughout your life. And may your words and your action bring that love and happiness to all. Go now in peace and in love.